She doesn't even use that money. That's what Mason said, beer in hand, firelight on his smirk, like I was some spoiled heiress, not the woman who built her company from a silent hospital room. Hi, my name is Alyssa Monroe. I'm 35, and I design audio therapy tools for stroke survivors who can't speak. It's not flashy. It's not loud. But it's the reason a little boy in Vermont said "Mom" again after 6 months of silence. That money he took, $94,000, was a research grant. It wasn't his to judge. It wasn't his to touch. But Mason, my brother-in-law, thought otherwise. And when someone crosses that kind of line, you don't scream, you don't beg. You build your case. You hold your ground. And you let justice walk through the front door when it's time. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone in your own family told you you didn't deserve what you worked for, this story is for you. Stay with me, and if it hits close to home, hit subscribe. Because stories like this, they don't end where you think. I used to think quiet was my weakness. Growing up in western Montana, where faith and family meant everything, I was the odd one. The girl who read neuroscience papers in the barn. The one who didn't go to prom. The one who stayed up late, splicing audio clips while her cousins played volleyball in the yard. My sister Danny was everything I was, charming, outgoing, soft in all the ways the world praises. She married young, wore pearls at brunch, and baked the kind of pies people wrote thank you notes for. And when she met Mason, I thought, maybe this was her happy ending. But even back then, something didn't sit right. Mason shook my hand the first time we met and held on just a second too long. He complimented my startup, then called it a passion project. He asked if I had a boyfriend, then chuckled when I said no. He was one of those men who wore charm like armor and talked to women like they were slow to catch on. Still, I smiled. I kept my distance. Because family matters, right? But as new resonance started to grow, as my work gained attention, funding, and results, Mason's questions became comments, his comments became critiques, and the compliments stopped altogether. He didn't just want access. He wanted ownership of the narrative, of me, and the night by that fire wasn't the first time he'd crossed a line. Just the first time I was done pretending not to notice. The lake house always smelled like cedar and wet stone. It was Grandpa's once, then Dad's. Now it was shared, though Mason always acted like he held the keys. That morning, the kitchen was still humming, coffee brewing, someone clinking plates, Danny softly humming like she used to. I had just woken up, slid my laptop out of its case, and something caught me. The charger was in the wrong port. Subtle, slight, but wrong. I'm the kind of person who notices those things. I opened the lid. Nothing on screen looked off until it did. A tiny alert in the corner. New login attempt failed, device not recognized. Timestamp 2:12 a.m. I froze, switched to my banking app. At first it didn't load, then it did. And my stomach turned cold. Checking, $0, 18. Business account, $0. Savings, zeroed out. I blinked, refreshed, again. It wasn't a bug, it was a clean sweep. Over $94,000 gone overnight, wired to a name I didn't recognize, from a device that wasn't supposed to exist. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I walked downstairs, past the cinnamon rolls, past Danny's worried glance, straight to the man pouring coffee like nothing had happened. He looked up, saw my face pale, and smirked. That's when I knew he wasn't surprised. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam anything, didn't even blink. I just walked to the center of the kitchen, phone in hand, and said, My money's gone." The room froze. Uncle Tim set down his fork. Aunt June stopped mid-chew. Danny just stared at her coffee. And Mason, he actually sipped his like it was still Sunday morning. "What do you mean, gone?" someone asked. I held up the screen, showed the app. The numbers, zeros, clean, precise. $94,000 transferred overnight from my business account, from my network, from my laptop. Emma gasped. My cousin Matthew let out a low whistle. Only 2 people didn't react, Danny and Mason. "Have you called the bank?" Emma asked. I did on speaker. I hit play. The voice of the fraud specialist came through. "Yes, Ms. Monroe, the transfers occurred between 1:48 a.m. and 3:17 a.m. using a known device and a recognized location. All credentials were entered correctly. And there it was, no hacking, no phishing, no outside threat, someone here. Used my laptop, knew my passwords, knew my security questions. And the man standing across from me, arms folded, jaw tight, was the only one who'd touched my machine. "Were you in my room last night, Mason?" I asked, calm. Danny finally spoke, her voice too quick. "Are you seriously accusing my husband?" But Mason didn't deny it, didn't argue. He just smiled and said 5 words that burned more than the theft itself. "We needed it more than you." I didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't fall apart, because the truth is I'd planned for this. Not him exactly. But for the moment, someone would think my quiet meant weak, that my calm meant unarmed. I reached into my bag, pulled out my second phone. "Mason," I said, "if you're so secure, show us your bank statements." He scoffed. "I don't have to prove anything to you. Then you won't mind what's coming next." The second I unlocked my screen, Mason lunged, tried to grab my wrist. Chairs scraped. Someone shouted. But before he could touch me, Uncle Tim stepped between us. "Back off, Mason." Emma pulled me behind her. Danny gasped, mouth open, face pale, not just afraid, but like she finally saw something she'd been denying for years. "What's really going on, Danny?" I asked softly. She opened her mouth, but Mason cut her off. "We're done here. Get your bags, we're leaving." And just as he reached for her arm, bang, the front door slammed open, boots on hardwood. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by a woman in jeans and a badge. "Rebecca Monroe?" the plainclothes officer asked. I nodded. "Detective Harmon, Portland PD. We received a fraud alert tied to your accounts." Mason turned white. "This is a misunderstanding," Mason stammered. Detective Harmon didn't blink. "We have evidence from your bank's cybersecurity team, transfer logs, device IDs, and matching access points, all tied to you." "This is a setup," he snapped. "She's just bitter, she's jealous, you don't know her." I stepped forward, calm, precise. "I installed a security program last fall after a phishing attempt. It logs every login attempt, takes photos through the webcam, tracks keystrokes, records access history." I handed her my phone. "This," I said, "is you. At 2:04 a.m. in my room on my laptop." The screen lit up, Mason's face, clear, focused. Unmistakable, caught mid-type, eyes glancing up at the camera, unaware it was watching. His smirk cracked. He turned to Danny. "You think you're safe now, without me?" He hissed. "You're nothing without me." She didn't flinch, didn't shrink. She stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. "No, I was nothing to you, but I'm finally learning who I am without you." And just like that, he was done. They cuffed him, read his rights, walked him out past the lake where he used to pretend he owned everything. The silence he left behind wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It wasn't over that night, but it began to feel like it could be. The bank recovered almost 98% of the stolen funds. Between cybersecurity insurance, the grant office, and the swift police response, new residents survived. But the real restoration wasn't financial. It was Danny. She moved in with me a week later, just a small guest room above my home office. The first night, she cried in the hallway, apologizing for everything she hadn't said. I didn't ask for more. We just started small, morning coffee, dinner without wine or tension, quiet walks where neither of us needed to fill the silence. She started baking again, those same pies she used to win ribbons for in high school. And one morning, while we chopped apples and almonds, she said, "You were brave. You protected what you built. I want to be brave enough to rebuild what I gave away." She enrolled in a local design program last month, found a part-time job helping teach art to trauma survivors. She's laughing again. Slowly, genuinely, and me, I launched a new module for my therapy device, one that helps users recognize emotional tones in speech. It's already helping kids reconnect with parents who thought they'd never hear "I love you" again. Some wounds don't heal quickly, but they heal better when you stop hiding them. Together, we returned to the lake house last weekend. Not for another reunion, not for tradition, but for something simpler, something real. Danny brought paint swatches. Emma brought muffins. Uncle Tim patched the roof with the same stubbornness he used to discipline teenage us. We cleared out Mason's things, quietly, firmly. No one raised their voice. No one had to. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt reclaimed. We made new rules, scribbled in Sharpie on the fridge. Real family protects. Real family doesn't manipulate. Real family listens, even to the quiet ones. Later that evening, Danny stood on the dock with me, barefoot, holding her sketchbook. She looked out at the still water and said, "I used to think silence meant weakness. Now I know it means space. Space to grow, space to choose, space to speak when you're ready." I smiled because I knew exactly what she meant. If you've ever had to cut someone out to protect what you love, if you've ever rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal, if you're still gathering courage, you're not alone. And if this story found you at the right time, let it remind you, blood doesn't entitle anyone to break you, but you. You're allowed to rise. If you've ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to realize silence was never safety, leave a comment, say, "I'm reclaiming myself." And if this story helped you feel seen, hit subscribe, because here we speak quietly, but we speak truth.